Hey guys, Chris here with Nebulosity. Welcome back to the neighborhood. So tonight's a really special episode because for the first time I'm going to be featuring my 10-inch Dobsonian telescope. This is the Orion XT10G motorized go-to version of the 10-inch Dobsonian by Orion Telescopes and Binoculars. Now, you don't have to get this particular design, the motorized version. You can get the push-to version. That's totally fine. I got the motorized version, and I'll show you a little bit later why in this episode. But the bottom line is this is a fantastic starter telescope for anyone out there who's just trying to get into this hobby for a couple of reasons. Number one, super affordable. Well under $1,000. You can get 1200 millimeters of focal length at f4.9 and a very large 10-inch aperture. That's going to collect a ton of light, and you're going to be able to see wonderful things like, planetary objects, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, as well as lunar surface features. So it's just a wonderful telescope, and I can't recommend it enough. It was absolutely recommended to me by a number of amateur astronomers and astrophotographers. When I said I want to get into this hobby, they said, Chris, get yourself a Dobsonian. It's just a wonderful telescope. So we're going to go through some of the applications that you can use in this video. First, we're going to look at, what do you do if you just have a simple iPhone? Well, we're going to take an iPhone, we're going to take a little adapter that I purchased from Amazon for about 25 bucks. We're going to walk through that sort of workflow and how you can use it to capture images on the moon. Tonight it's about 100%, so that'll be a nice opportunity for us as the moon is just coming up over the horizon here, and we should be able to capture that when the sun goes down in not too long a time. Beyond that, we're going to go to a little bit more of an advanced setup where I'm going to show you how you can attach the DSLR camera that you may have already at home to this same telescope. Now, there are a number of videos out there that show you how to do it. I'm going to try to show you both the iPhone and the DSLR both in the same video, and then at the end I'll show you a little bit of my post-process editing in terms of a couple of different software packages. That's PIPP, PIPP, as well as AutoStakkert and Registax. So let's go ahead and get to it, and hopefully at the end of the video we'll have something to show. Thanks, and best of luck in all of your projects. Now, I apologize for rushing here, but the sun is going down, so I'm going to try to capture this as quickly as I can before it gets too dark. So this is the adapter that I was talking about. It's a very simple adapter. You can see there's a circular element here that has a little set of 3 clamps that will go around an eyepiece. So you can rotate this counterclockwise and clockwise to get the clamps to sort of clamp down on that eyepiece so that it's sturdy. On the other side, you have the actual clamps for the iPhone itself. So if I take out this particular device, this is an iPhone 11, I can sort of slide it up here into this element. And at the back of any iPhone or any smartphone, you've got your different camera lenses back here. So you'll notice in the adapter there's a hole in there. What you'll want to do first is you'll want to get this cranked down, and I'll leave a description, or I'll leave a link in the description below for all of these different products to give you an idea of where I've identified or I've located them. But you go ahead and clamp that down. You've got the adapter piece here, and then what you do is you sort of rotate it around and up so that it fits right over the eyepiece. And I'll show you here, if I turn my phone on and hit this button, you can see I can see right through it. And if I were to put my hand there, now you may get a little bit of vignetting on the side, so just be aware of that when you're sort of adjusting it. Make sure that you've got it really nice and tight and locked down on both sides. Over here, there's a little bracket here you can sort of tighten as well. Just be aware that as you're doing that, you may tilt this out of area. So again, we have the adapter here. We're going to go ahead and turn it onto this eyepiece right here, and just like so. Very simple setup. Something that pretty much anyone can do, anyone can use. Not a whole lot to it. And all you have to do is slew this telescope now to your intended target. In the case of the moon, that's probably your best bet to sort of get practice with this. But you're going to want to go ahead and slew your telescope, and for a lot of the designs it's as simple as rotating it on this Alt-Az mount. That's one of the features of a Dobsonian telescope, is that is on an altitude azimuth mount, meaning a mount that goes side to side and up and down. It's sort of on like a Lazy Susan type tabletop mount versus a German equatorial mount that sort of tracks the sky and rotates. But you just, you sort of move this into position, and when you're ready, you can go ahead and hit the capture button on your phone, or if you want to do video, you can do that as well. But this is a really super user-friendly setup that works really well for amateurs who, again, don't have the DSLR camera. Maybe they just have an iPhone. You pick up a $300-400, Dobsonian telescope, 8-inch, 10-inch. You get a simple eyepiece in there, and this sort of gets you started on that journey. I took my first pictures of the moon with this setup, my first pictures of Comet Neowise. So just really, really fun, and I think it's a nice stepping stone, if you're just getting into this hobby. So anyway, take it for what it's worth. It's a very basic option. I think the next thing we're going to talk about, though, is attaching the DSLR camera. So let me switch these devices around, and I can show you how we attach the DSLR. Okay guys, welcome back to the second part of this video where we're going to talk about attaching a DSLR camera to the Dobsonian telescope. Now I'm going to work my way backwards. That's just the way my mind works, but hopefully you can follow along, and we'll try to keep it super simple. Now let's start with detaching the whole setup from the dual focuser. So we've got the 2-inch focuser here, and the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take that simple 1 1/4 inch adapter, and you're going to want to place it into the telescope's focuser here so that you get that 1 1/4 inch diameter space. Let me talk about the next piece of equipment that you're going to need. So this is a combo piece of a T-ring adapter as well as a T-ring. These are actually two separate pieces. They screw into one another. You can screw them back in. You can purchase them separately. I did. I think the T-ring adapter was like 30 bucks. I'm sorry, 20 bucks, and then the T-ring itself was like 30, 35. So the T-ring itself will will connect right into the camera body like so. A nice click, firm, solid piece there. And then from there, you've got this T-ring adapter on the front, this snub nose piece. You can get yourself a ×2 Barlow. Now you may already have one of these, but if you don't have one, I'd recommend it, especially for visual astronomy. It's really great. You get a ×2 magnification on objects, and it's just a nifty piece of equipment. So what you do here is you slide this magnifier, this Barlow lens, into the 1 1/4 inch focuser, and then you take your DSLR with the T-ring and T-ring adapter, and you drop it right in. You secure it to the Barlow lens, and voila. Now you have a double magnification setup here. Now you won't be able to get the full moon at 1200 millimeters with an APS-C crop sensor, but it's really good for lunar landscape. Totally awesome. You get the cliffs from those craters. You get so many different features, especially at partial moon. You can get a lot of contrast, but even a full moon, it's just really beautiful. So that's pretty much it. Look, I want to get outside. The moon is already rising. I can see it through the window. Super excited about it, but hopefully you guys learned some stuff through this video, and I'm happy to share as much content as you guys think would be relevant for what you're trying to achieve out there as well. One of the things you're going to want to do is go to your settings on your camera and adjust the ISO setting. This is normally set to auto in many cases when you're doing video mode, but you'll need to check your camera specifications. I usually adjust my ISO setting to between 200 and 400, and when doing video I shoot anywhere from 30 to 60 frames per second. If you're shooting shorter exposure times at 30 frames per second, you may need to reduce your ISO setting even further depending on the brightness of the moon. But overall, that seems to be a pretty good level for me, and as you can see here, my camera allows me to start by pressing the start button on record, and I'm capturing 60 frames per second, so in 1 minute I can capture up to 3600 frames, and I'll be using my pre-processing imaging software later on to pick out the very best frames and do a stack. So pretty simple stuff, but very effective, and this is known as lucky imaging. Alright guys, I'm going to try to get through this section as efficiently as possible. There's a lot of information to cover, so just please bear with me. Now, I mentioned at the early part of the video that we need 3 different software packages to help our pre-processing exercise, those being PIPP, AutoStakkert, and Registax 6. So I've gone ahead and pulled up the web links for each. You can type this in Google, PIPP, Astrophotography, AutoStakkert, and Registax, and it's usually the first link available on that browser. Now, for Planetary Imaging Preprocessor, what this app does essentially is it crops down the video file so that, and it anchors the video file, the singular point towards the middle of your, your moon image or your planetary image, so that it's not bouncing around, but rather it's centered in the frame, despite the fact that it may have been moving across during, the filming itself. If you're not tracking it, that's totally fine. So that's what this does, is it crops that down. The other thing that it does is it takes your file, which may be an MP4, which is the case in my DSLR and iPhone. It'll go ahead and convert that to an AVI file, which AutoStakkert really loves. So that's really why you need this. Other than that, there's not a whole lot to it. We'll go through that in a little bit. For AutoStakkert, this was an app developed back in, I guess, 2009 by Emil Krijkamp out of Belgium. He's developed this very, very useful tool which enables you to do the stacking process, lucky imaging, as I mentioned before, where you're basically taking the best frames from your video and stacking those and discarding the rest. So wonderful app. It, along with PIPP and Registax, are all free for non-commercial purposes, which is the case in this video, but if you are using this for commercial purposes, you'll definitely want to reach out to the developers for each of these softwares to make sure that you're not running into trouble or issues with those uses. Last but not least, you'll want to download Registax 6. So when you go to the website, there are a couple of downloads. First, the main app at Registax 6. You'll make sure that you download the correct version, whether you're a Linux user, Mac OS, Windows. Once you download Registax 6, you'll also want to download this update 6.1.0.8 that came out not too long after version 6. You'll make sure that both of those are downloaded in the same place on your hard drive, and they should work fine. So let's go ahead and dive into the software themselves. I'm going to double click on PIPP, and you can see it's a very simple user interface. We're here on the Source Files tab. I'm not going to go through all the different tabs. There's a lot that you can do here, but generally as a beginner, there are just a few functions that you'll want to look at in the beginning. So the first thing you're going to want to do is click on Add Image Files. And when you click on there, you're going to want to pull up, I have here on my desktop, a couple of video files. I have this 56-second video MP4 file from my DSLR camera, and I have this 2.5-minute video MP4 as well from my iPhone 11. So for the purposes of this exercise, we're just going to use the 56-second video from the DSLR camera. So we double click that. This prompt pulls up the image of the file like a single frame. You can zoom in or zoom out. I typically just leave it here until I need it. Don't really do much else with it. You can see here under image file list, all the key information is listed, from frames, frames per second, your resolution, and so forth. Down at the bottom you have multiple source files, so you can do batch mode if you want to process individual videos, or you can do join mode if you have multiple files that you want to put together. I leave it to batch mode for this single exercise. You could do the same. Now, optimize options 4. If you have a small refractor telescope, or just let's say the moon or any planetary object in the frame, in the field of view, and a lot of black sky around, you can go ahead and use Planetary to crop down to what is needed, a nice square around the object, which is really helpful. But in this case, as you can see in the preview, we're not in that space. We're actually zoomed in quite a bit. So rather than Planetary, we're going to click Solar Lunar Close-Up. And we'll left click this bottom corner of this red grid to maximize that. We'll left click the anchor point. We'll bring it over towards a place where we want the software to anchor, right there. And that's pretty much all you need to do in the beginning. Now, the next tab you want to click on is Processing Options. So here you'll normally have Object and Planetary selected. Now that's good again if your field of view has the moon within the center or the core. That way you can crop around it. But again, because we're looking at surface features, we're going to want to click on that. No need to change any of the specs here. It's fine as it is. If you want to play around with it, you can, but I recommend in the beginning just leaving it as it is. Really not going to go into these other tabs. Don't make a lot of changes here. In terms of output options, the output format is AVI. That's what AutoStakkert likes, so we want to keep it in that video format. And then we're going to go to do processing over here, and you can see there's a little description of the file itself, and we can go ahead and click Start Processing. So there we go. Depending on your CPU, I've got a Intel i7 9700K 8-core processor. So it takes about, I would say, anywhere from 4 to 7 minutes, depending on how many frames. With 3,300 frames, it's going to take a few minutes, but it's not too long. So let's go ahead and just pause here for a little bit, and we'll come back when this is done. Okay guys, welcome back. That took a little longer than expected, around 500 seconds, but PIPP did produce the AVI file. And so as you can see here, this image is no longer moving in and out of the frame. It's centered. The crop factor is happening there at the bottom. You can see that's where the image was slowly going out of frame, and PIPP picked that up. But that's fine. Let's go ahead and close this out and open up AutoStakkert. And as you can see here, there's a couple of windows. We're going to go ahead and open the file that we just created, and there's going to be the same anchor point here on the right. On the left, we're going to leave these options as is. No need to change it. They're pretty good for a beginner. So you can go ahead and hit the button Analyze, and what this is doing is analyzing the surface stabilization as well as buffering and analyzing the individual frames to sort of see what the quality is. And there'll be a graph here in just a second. There it is, the quality graph, and you can see this is a really good quality graph actually. There's a nice wave action here. It's pretty consistent across the board. This middle line here represents 50% quality, so a number of the frames are at or above that amount. So what we can do now is go to the right, and we could either set manual anchor points, or we can click Place Alignment Point Grid. The computer will think for a few moments as to what the alignment points ought to be, and it selected 284. Now that's a lot, but it's fine for this image. There's a lot of detail there. Once those anchor points are selected, you can then select how many, what percentage of frames you want to keep in individual stacks. I like to do 25, 50, and 75 to give myself a little look to see which one's better. Generally speaking, 25 frames works really well, but sometimes 50 and 75 can give you a little bit more. I do keep it as a TIFF file because that 16-bit channel TIFF file is helpful for post-process editing, and we're going to be doing a little bit of that in Registax. I don't do any sharpening or RGB alignment or anything like that. I don't rename the files as well. There's a sort of a default naming convention. I don't do any drizzle. I'm not undersampling. If that term undersampling is foreign to you, I'd recommend looking it up on Google or on other YouTube videos. There's a lot around undersampling and what that means. So you could do some drizzling, but I won't need that for this. So I'm going to go ahead and click Stack, and I'll come back in a second, but just to let you guys know, every one of these stacks takes about anywhere from a minute to a minute and a half to go through. select a reference frame. I let the system select the best frame. You could do it manually. I let the system do it, and then it goes from that reference frame and stacks the best images based on that frame. So we're going to let this run for a few minutes, and we're going to come back. Should be done in about 5 to 7 minutes. Alrighty, we are done. As you can see here, if we were to click on our folder, we now have 3 folders with each of the images. And if you were to go through and select each one, you could, verify which one you like the most. I'm just going to do a quick look here. I kind of like the 25% version, so I'm going to run with that. So what we can do is we can go ahead and close that app and open Registax. Here we go, final step. Okay, so here what we're going to want to do is click select, and we're going to want to go into our 25% TIFF file, hit open. We do not want to stretch intensity levels, so hit no. Now we've got a zoomed in image. You could click show full image if you like. I actually like having the zoomed in feature, and there are a couple of C's here. There's the Sea of Serenity and the Sea of Rain or Showers. This is Mare Imbrium. Boy, look at that massive craters here and this very tranquil space here. It's just amazing how just such a short distance there's so much going on. In any case, on the right hand side we have functions. There are a lot of functions here. If you had a color image, you could do histogram and look at the black and white points. There's all kinds of stuff, but the only one of interest today is view zoomed, at least from my vantage point. So I've got this little panel here, and if I hold down the control button on my keypad, as I scroll, I can move the the frame right over to where I want. I like to have the craters here, get some good contrast, release the control button, and there we are. So now the powerful element of Registax are the wavelets. These wavelets really focus on 2 key elements, denoise and sharpen. Now I don't mess with sharpen, but I do like to adjust the denoise factor. So I go to the first layer and I type in a value of about 35, 0.25 for the second layer, and you can see I'm just going lower and lower in terms of intensity as I go down, try to keep that natural look. Now this slider here on the first layer, you can click that and you can drag it across just the way you want it, and I tend to bring it up anywhere from 60 to 75. Let's go ahead and bring it right there at it's not too bad, 75.4. Okay, then we're going to bring the second one up to about anywhere from 30 to 50, and then the third layer anywhere from 10 to 25. Okay, now let's just look at this for a moment. If I were to remove these layers, look at the difference there. Look at the blur you get in the first image, and the amount of contrast that you get with that is just incredible. I just can't I can't describe how wonderful that feels. And so when you're done, go ahead and click Save Image. You can play around with it, but I'm very happy with that. I want to do all functions, so I'm going to click Yes, get that locked in, and it's going to think for a second, and it's going to ask me where I want to save this. I'm actually I've got something very similar that I processed just a little while ago. It's basically the same image. So you can go ahead and close this file at this point. And of course, you'll want to make sure you save the image. I've actually got it here. So I'm going to pull that up. So that is this image here. We can see a lot of contrast. Don't worry about these streaks. That's something that you can crop out. This is where the image was sort of going out of the frame. It's totally normal. This is the original that was stacked in AutoStakkert. So look at the difference. I mean, the contrast, it's night and day, no pun intended. Speaking of contrast, just one last tip. I took images yesterday with the iPhone, the full moon, and that's fine. It is sort of a flat image. There's not as much contrast on a full moon. You definitely want to be capturing a moon at partial moon phases, if possible, quarter moon, half moon. That's your best bet because you get that dark and light contrast, and you can see these valleys, and it's wonderful. But you can see the difference. I mean, just totally different pictures. And last but not least, I just wanted to show this final image. This is cropped out so you can see it's a little more narrow than these images, but there's also more detail. I put this in Photoshop and Lightroom. You know, you could go into PixInsight, whatever, you know, choose your own adventure there. But I also added in, well, there was a little bit of color in there, so I just boosted that. Sort of a gray tone, a little bit of a brownish and bluish gray off tone. But you know, this is artistic preference at this point. You can do what you wish. If you want a natural looking image, it's sort of soft, you can run with what comes out of AutoStakkert. If you want something that's a little bit more refined with you know, a punch, you could run that through Registax and get this. And if you wanted something a little even more artistic with a little coloration, you can run that through you know, through your post-processing software. So at the end of the day, it's just a treat to be able to take something like a video, do some lucky imaging with your Dobsonian and, you know, your imaging setup, whether it's the iPhone or DSLR or what have you, and be able to create this magic. It's what it's all about. So I'm really happy with this at the end of the day, and hopefully you guys can replicate it based on what we've done here. Okay guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. It's been a long couple of days and nights, and it's been a long video, so thank you so much for hanging around. I hope that it means you learned something, but if I could answer any questions that you have, go ahead and drop them in the section below. I'll be happy to answer those offline or through the comments section, whichever you prefer. Look, at the end of the day, this is a wonderful hobby. The Dobsonian to iPhone / DSLR combo and doing lunar astro is a wonderful entry point, but there are many. The most important thing is getting out there, you know, setting up your rig and looking at the night sky and just getting familiar with those objects. That's what it's all about, and finding that passion. So hopefully you saw something here of interest. Either way, I appreciate you coming by. We look forward to seeing you here in the neighborhood next time, and as always, take care.